So welcome everyone to this month's Jyotish Journey webinar associated with the article Lights, Camera, Action, which was of course charts of movie directors. Nice to see everyone again. I know it's been a while since I got out an article and also had a webinar, but I'm going to try to get back on track here. So before we get started looking at the charts of other directors, what are some of the things that emerged from assessing the charts of movie directors that might be related to their becoming movie directors? What are some of the factors that you recall that emerged? Anyone?
Strong third house.
Well,
third,
in general,
310 connection.
In general, of course, with the charts of people who are involved in movie making, actors for sure, potentially directors as well, a strong third house, third lord, oftentimes connections between 310 and 31. What else? How about some yogas that tended to show up frequently?
Sense of Raja Yogas.
Well, of course, you know, Raja Yogas, but I was sort of emphasizing a particular kind of Raja Yoga that can give a person, put a person in leadership positions in particular, right?
Raja Yogas which connect the 3rd, 10th and the 1st houses.
Raja Yogas that are 1, 5, 1, 10 in particular, right? 1, 5, 1, 10. 5th house we talked about as being the house of Rajya,
Hello,
the authority group. Sonali, hello, we're doing the seminar. Please mute your mic for a moment.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Yes, those particular type of Raja Yogas. What else?
Sasha Yoga.
Sasha Yoga and a strong Saturn in general, right? Sasha Yoga and a strong Saturn. Of course, Sasha Yoga can make you leader of a village, which of course, you know, is what a director is to some degree. And I talked about Saturn being the natural lord of the, you know, the Kala Purush and related to managerialness in general. What else? Any other yogas show up pretty frequently?
Saraswati Yoga.
Saraswati Yoga showed up frequently, which of course can show up in the charts of anyone who's getting involved in artistic pursuits. But of course, movie directing is an artistic pursuit as well. What else?
Gajakesari Yoga.
Gajakesari Yoga, which again can give you prominence in any field, but certainly showed up fairly frequently. Either Kesari or Gajakesari Yoga showed up very frequently in the charts of these, you know, very successful directors. And especially for Libra, where you have the moon ruling the 10th and Jupiter ruling the 3rd, right? Any other thoughts that were a part of that?
Lakshmi Yoga. You want to have a good Lakshmi Yoga because you want to have great wealth as a result of your movies, right? You want to have...
Well, certainly not just Lakshmi Yoga, but obviously these very successful directors typically get wealthy being directors too. So the presence of Dhan Yogas are, you know, were evident, no question. Anyone remember anything else?
Sun-Mars connection to the 1st house.
Sun-Mars connection to the 1st house or the 10th house, right? We spoke about the sun, of course, being the planet of authority, Mars being the commander-in-chief. And these planets showed up connected to the 1st house, 1st lord, 10th house, 10th lord, rather repeatedly. So see, these were some of the main thoughts that emerged from that. So I'm going to now share screen.
Mark, can I just add one thing, please?
You most certainly can.
I have not had have not had the time to go through the article, but I just wanted to find out from you if the connection of Rahu with either the 1st house or the 5th house or the 5th lord showed up.
And what's your thought about that? What's your thought about that?
Rahu is the planet for expansion. It's also like it's a planet that basically exemplifies illusion.
Right, right.
5th house is the house of illusion, and your lagna is also the way you express yourself. So that's the 1-5 connection or the connection with the 1st house or the 5th lord. So I have to see the charts, but since you've already done it, like, did that connection show up pretty frequently? The Rahu with the first house,
Well,
first lord, fifth house.
it's a very relevant, I think, interesting idea that should be explored. I did not explore that myself, and I would agree with you. Rahu is, the illusion maker. I'm not sure where you get the derivation of the fifth house being the house of illusion. I would think of that.
It's your expression, it's your interest, inclination. So pursuits towards that expression, the way it's expressed, the Rahu kind of expression. That is where I'm going with that.
Okay, all right.
Mark, could I mention something along this line, Mark?
Of course.
One of the things I've noticed in some of the actors, directors who play roles like Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon, or Clint Eastwood in Dirty Harry, or Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs, for example, they all have a Rahu-Mars connection in their chart. It's sort of the violent, aggressive sort of tendency, and they display that in their movies quite frequently.
No, I think it's a very intelligent comment. I have noted before how actors and actors gravitating to certain roles, you'll find those combinations in their chart that sort of express that role, which is what you're talking about, right? So thank you for that input. So you're all you should be looking at, and somebody please verify this, you should be looking at the chart of Martin Scorsese, yes?
Yep.
Okay. So Martin Scorsese is actually probably, right up there with people like Spielberg and Lucas and William Wyler. He's actually been nominated 12 times for an Academy Award as Best Director, winning once. And, his films have been among the most acclaimed award-winning films in the modern era. Now, I chose not to include him in the main article for several different reasons. First of all, his birth data is given an A rating on astrodatabank.com because it comes from his mother. Although you see the time here, 24 minutes after midnight, it appears rather precise, but it does come from mother's memory, not a written record. And that in of itself wouldn't have been that much of a problem for me. But see the degree of the ascendant, 3 degrees, 37 minutes, which is not right on the edge, but it would, 12, 13 minutes or so, if the birth time was off, if he was born actually 12, 13, 14 minutes earlier than that, the Lagna would change from Leo to Cancer. So it raises the question about the correct ascendant. The third reason I didn't include it is I wanted a famous Hollywood director to talk about in the webinar. But one of the things that has to be considered here is which ascendant might be correct. Now, the way in which K. and Rahu, my Jyotish guru, always tried to do that was not just with the things that they were famous for and the timing of that, but situations and events from their personal life, right? And one bio fact about Martin Scorsese is that he's been married 5 times. Right? He's been married 5 times. And we're going to look at that timing, but before we even look at that timing, just looking at either Leo as the Lagna or Cancer as the Lagna, which do you prefer in terms of giving 5 marriages, one versus the other, and why? Think about this.
Leo, Mark.
Leo.
Well, Venkat, make your case.
Leo is in the Rahu, with Leo, the 7th house is in the Rahu-Ketu axis. Number 1. Number 2, it is occupied by the 12th Lord Moon. Those were some of the, it is also the 7th house is aspected by Saturn. I think it is quite heavily afflicted. The 7th house from Leo is quite heavily afflicted if Leo is the Lagna.
But
Mars.
Hold on, just a second. But Saturn, as the 7th Lord, is aspecting onto his own 7th house.
Oh yeah,
So
that is
you would not consider that an affliction. And
yeah.
Mars is going to aspect Saturn, who would be the 7th Lord, whether it's Leo or Cancer. Rohit, you had a comment?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I
The
would,
reason-
what, yeah, what I,
Primarily, it is the Rahu Ketu axis and the fact that the 7th house is the 12th Lord Moon.
what I would just add to that is that if you make Cancer the Lagna, an exalted Jupiter would be aspecting the 7th house,
Correct.
and that would change things dramatically.
Correct. Is there another? Well, first of all,
Well, Mark, I just I don't know if I can say something, or do you want to finish what you're trying to say?
no, I want you to comment.
Well, thank you. Well, if you look at Cancer Lagna, the 7th Lord Saturn will be in the 11th house of multiplication.
Indeed, it would.
And that also would give, multiple marriages. I mean, I'm trying to just play devil's advocate here.
No, and we need to do that.
I still, Rahu Ketu in 1/7 is very convincing, but it's a Sthira Lagna. So, and the 7th house is Sthira, in a Sthira Rashi. So, chances of multiplicity is less. That doesn't mean it won't happen. But this is like a huge multiplicity times. And 11th house is the highest karma house. And that fits the picture.
Right.
And, an exalted.
And this is why this process can drive you nuts, because you can make cases both ways. Now, let me add. Anyone else want to say anything about static potential? You're just on the Rashi, because then, of course, we have to look at
So, Mark, this is Brahmendra. If you want to look at it from Venus, Venus is conjunct Sun. It's what do you call very close, and so combust. And then you have Saturn, the 6th Lord, aspecting Venus in the 4th. So Saturn again is a separative planet with Leo Lagna. If you take Cancer, then it becomes 7 and 8. So I think it just makes a better case here. Affliction to Venus, the Karka, and 7th from it.
Well, and that's a very relevant comment. It doesn't help us establish the correctness of the Lagna, right? Now, the fact that Venus gets which is the natural Karaka, of course, of love and love relations, the fact it gets the aspect of Saturn does relate to the fact that he was married 5 times, right? But
how has his karma been with kids?
Well, we'll get into that in a moment. I just want to stay with the marriage for the moment. And we're
Mark,
hold on. Please stop. Hold on. Hold your comments for a moment. I just want to emphasize.
Mark,
Sonali, please. Sonali,
Yeah.
Sonali, please hold your comments for the moment. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hold your comments for a moment. I was just trying to comment. So, again, establishing things from like Chandra Lagna or Karaka Lagna in this case, of course, doesn't help us determine the correctness of the Lagna. Now, let me give you the information that he first married in 1965 in Saturn Moon. He first married in Saturn Moon. And in Charadasha, it was Scorpio. What strikes you?
DK is there.
DK is there, and natural Karaka Venus is there. So when we go to determine these things, we look at timing, right? And that sometimes helps us to establish a stronger case for one or the other in situations where a case could be made for both, which, as we heard from people, a case could be made for both.
Saturn Moon, Mark, is quite clearly indicates Leo, because Moon is in the 7th house and Saturn aspects the 7th house.
Exactly. Saturn is the 7th Lord. It aspects the 7th house in there, and then of course it would be Moon. And I would have to agree with people that the disturbance of the Rahu Ketu axis here along 1/7, with the Moon as the 12th Lord there, makes a stronger case for Leo, and then this timing makes a stronger case for Leo. And one of the beautiful things about using Charadasha to verify ascendants is that, of course, Charadasha starts with the sign on the ascendant. And if the sign on the ascendant is correct, Charadasha will tend to come out Of course, if it's not correct, then timing in Charadasha will tend not to come out. But then there's, we'd want to use the Navamsha for this, but what's the immediate problem with this degree of the Lagna with using the Navamsha? Can anyone see that?
It is even more sensitive to time.
320 it will
Right,
move it
it's even more sensitive time. So this would get what? This would give what as a Navamsha Lagna? This degree of Lagna would give what as a Navamsha Lagna?
Taurus.
Taurus or
And what would say if it was below 320? What would it give?
Aries.
Aries.
Aries. Now look at this. Look at the Navamsha. This is Taurus, but please have the information that 3 of his 5 marriages, let me just check that. Yeah, 3 of his 5 marriages came in Mercury. It came in Mercury. And of course, some of his greatest successes, came in Saturn, followed by Mercury, followed by Ketu, followed by Venus. Okay. And what would that maybe suggest about which Navamsha Lagna might be correct?
Taurus looks correct.
And why would you say that, Nima?
Because Mercury and Saturn, it's a Mishra Sankar Yoga in the negative house.
But then how does Mercury, either based on the birth chart, either from Cancer or from Leo, give 3 marriages?
It's in Libra. With more, Libra is another natural.
I can see your point there. That I would see that's a fairly weak qualification.
It is.
I would see that whereas I would see Mercury in the Lagna of the Navamsha getting directional strength, but as the 6th Lord, it makes a stronger case. Also, this Navamsha would put Saturn as the 10th Lord in the 3rd with Rahu, and his first directorial debut was in Saturn Rahu. And see Saturn Rahu in the Dashamsha, which would not change if, is this the right now? This is the right. Anyway, Saturn Rahu here would put Saturn in the 10th house, right? So again, it's a hypothesis. We're just speculating here, folks. I'm not saying that there's any way of knowing this absolutely for sure, but because of the marriages in Mercury and some other things about this Navamsha and some timing that we're going to be looking at, it would favor Aries.
Mark,
One at a time. Angus, were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to ask a question. When in the Navamsha, when the Mercury period is running, it activates the 2nd house of family, and it has Rahu and Saturn there. Would that be a factor?
The 2nd house of family. What chart are you looking at? Navamsha or the birth chart?
Yeah, this one here.
Well, I'm speculating that it's Aries Lagna, not Taurus.
Okay, but I was just thinking if it was Taurus, would that be a factor with Rahu and Saturn there?
With regards to what?
Family. Separation.
I'd see that more in the birth chart, quite frankly. If you're talking about using the 2nd house and family is family of origin in the 2nd house. It's not the family you create yourself through marriage and children.
Okay, thank you.
Rohit, were you going to make a comment?
Yeah, Mark, just the reason I asked about children was because it was based on the static potential of the birth chart. If it was actually Cancer Lagna, his experience with children would have been pretty good. But if it's Leo, I wouldn't say it would have been really really special or anything, so to speak. 5th Lord retrograde goes to the 12th, aspected by Saturn.
Mm-hmm. And I know he has children, several. Going off the top of my head here, I didn't really look at children or the timing of that because the timing of his birth of his children was not available, as I recall. But he does have children. but I hear your comment, but I can't respond to it because I just don't know.
Okay.
Mark, it's George here.
Yes.
Now, if it's Leo Wagner, see the situation around the 10th house then. You have Saturn, malefic. And then it's aspected by Mars, malefic. And then the 10th word, although in exchange in getting directional strength, it's with all those malefics. Again, Saturn aspecting Venus, it's in the heart of the sun, mild malefic. It's in exchange with Mars. So if it's Leo Wagner, wouldn't you say that his career wouldn't have been so strong?
Well, I can give you an alternative view, okay? Particularly since he first got his directorial successes in Saturn, and then most recently, his latest directorial success for which he was nominated for Best Director was in Sun Saturn. And here's my alternative view. You see here the sun, Venus would be the lord of the 3rd and 10th, aspecting back onto its own house, forming a 110 Raja Yoga in an angle. Now, people see the close conjunction between the sun and Venus, but this, to my mind, is that heart of the sun Cassini effect, and Venus actually becomes a powerhouse here, which it appears to have been because some of his greatest successes and nominations for Best Director and actually winning Best Director came in his Venus major period. And then, yes, Saturn is the natural malefic in the 10th, aspected by Yogacaraka Mars. But Saturn is also an angle lord here in a mutual glance with the sun, who's the Lagna lord, and they do form a 1-7 Raja Yoga. Venus has sources of strength, as you will see, in Navamsha. What's the source of strength in Navamsha?
Exchange.
The exchange. And then what's the source of strength? What's the source of strength in Dashamsha?
It's exchange.
Exchange again. And let me give you the information that probably the peak of his career was this movie. Well, yes, he had many peaks, but one of his peaks is this movie called The Departed, for which he actually won the Best Director award in Venus Jupiter. Mm-hmm. Think about Venus Jupiter here, right? Where both the sun and the 10th lord aspecting onto the 10th house get the aspect of the strong Jupiter. Jupiter, not only in its exaltation sign, but Vargotama, make the Navamsha Lagna Aries, see Jupiter and Venus here, and then see Jupiter and Venus here, presuming this is the correct D10 Lagna, where Venus is in the 11th house of awards and in exchange with the 11th Lord and aspected by the Swakshetra Jupiter.
Yep. Forming Mukuta Yoga, by the way.
And forming Mukuta Yoga back in the birth chart. So I don't have a problem with the natural malefics influencing the 10th house here.
Okay.
For that reason. Now make Saturn a Dasha Lagna, because recall that it was in Saturn Rahu and the Saturn period in general that he first came to directorial success. Anyway, the problem with all of this, and I don't want to belabor it too much, is that judgment, a lot of judgment comes involved, right? Because cases can be made in both directions, but I strongly prefer Leo Lagna for the reasons that I've outlined here. Particularly the marital situation in terms of the 5 marriages and the timing of those, but even the timing of his major successes. Now, you can make the case that, Venus, Jupiter from Cancer could also give a very good result, right? Venus would be involved in a 4-5 exchange there, Raja Yoga exchange. So, it's a question. It's a judgment. I'm open to any other comments that people might make if they want to take an
I was going to make a comment, Mark, about his health. Like with Jupiter in the 1st, what was his physical constitution like? What did he appear like? taking those factors into consideration versus Rahu in the first, what was his personality like? You know,
Right.
maybe you don't know.
You know, what is he famous for making movies about? What kind of characters? Anybody know?
Criminals, pretty much.
Mobsters.
Mobsters, yeah.
Right? Mobsters and criminals. And he himself got extremely addicted to cocaine. In fact, Robert De Niro, who starred in a lot of his movies, said that the movie Raging Bull that he directed and won Academy Awards, and Robert De Niro got the Academy Award for Best Actor, and he was nominated for Best Director. He said it saved Scorsese's life because he was killing himself with his cocaine addiction. So again, this makes, to my mind, and you know, I have a lot of data. You know, you folks have only the data that I've shared with you thus far. I'm sharing more and more as we discuss here. Yeah. But this is a good thought. What does Cancer with Jupiter in the Lagna show as far as personality and some facts of his life? And what does Rahu show? Rahu seems to, he was fascinated with kind of the whole life of the underworld, right? And of the mobster king. And, you know, many of his films, Gangs of New York, The Departed, Goodfellas, Casino, all these films deal with this kind of character, which, you know, these natural malefics influencing the 10th house sort of coincides with that idea as well. So again, we could debate and we could discuss this, and that's going to be an enjoyable sort of thing, but I'm not going to belabor it too much here. I just wanted to talk about this chart because he is such a renowned Hollywood director, and you know, I did not include it in the first. So let's move on here. And what I want to do is go back to, you know, I told you the story of this man who contacted me about whether he has a chart that could make him a Hollywood director, and then he sent me a bunch of birth data on famous Hollywood directors, some of whom had also been actors and producers, right? But they'd all been directors. And I didn't really comment that much, or hardly at all, with regards to those charts, partially because I didn't know how much to trust the birth times, and didn't really take the time then anyway to research these. I found that most of these charts came from a website called AstroSage, which I'm sure particularly Indians among us here may be aware of. And they do rate their data, but they don't rate it the way in which the astrodatabank.com rates it. They just say whether it's accurate or not. So these birth times did get a rating of, quote, accurate, but I'm not really sure what that means and how that is derived. So, you know, it's more a question of, does the chart fit the life? And does the chart fit some of the timing? Kay and Raul oftentimes said that every chart had to prove itself, even charts based on a recorded birth time. And you notice that all these birth times, and I mentioned this in the article, are usually to the hour to the half hour, which always, you know, makes me suspect as to whether they, at the very minimum, might be rounded or just approximations. But, you know, if this is indeed, well, first of all, for those of you who don't know who this person was, I've downloaded some information here that you can see and read here about him and his life. He was obviously one of the pioneers of the Indian cinema, as it says here. His heyday, you might say, was, you know, starting in the 40s, and the most famous film that he directed was something called Mother India in 1957. Which won him, you know, Best Film and Best Director awards. And actually, he was a nominee for Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film this time. So we'll look at this timing. But before we look at this timing, what strikes you about this chart in keeping with some of the predictive parameters I posed in the article?
Well, there's Sasha Yoga. I mean,
there's obviously a very prominent Sasha Yoga, and what about this Sasha Yoga in particular?
Well, it's basically it's Sasha Yoga from the moon also.
It's Sasha Yoga from both the birth chart and from the moon. And then think about this combination of Saturn and Venus from both the birth chart and the moon. What would strike you about that?
Maharaja Yoga.
Well, no. Well, Maharaja Yoga from the birth log, not from the moon.
True, true. But
yeah.
basically, you are reverting the Raja Yogas, because from Capricorn you have Venus as the Raja Yoga Karaka, and then since Moon is in Libra, then Saturn becomes the Raja Yoga Karaka.
Correct. So, and it's the 1-5, right? And it's also a 1-5 from both. It's a 1-5 from Capricorn with Venus as the 5th Lord and Yoga Karaka planet, Saturn as the Lagna Lord in its own sign, and then from the moon, Saturn becomes a Yoga Karaka planet, Venus is the Lagna Lord, and it's also a 1-5 combination. So, you know, obviously this would fit the bill, right?
Both planets have strength.
And
from the moon mark, it is not 1-5, it is 1-4.
No, it's 1-5 too, because Saturn is the 5th Lord.
Okay, yeah.
They're in the 4th house, and of course Saturn's also the 4th Lord, but Saturn's also the 5th Lord. And what other notable features that might be relevant would exist here if this is indeed the correct Lagna?
Mukuta Yoga.
Mukuta Yoga, again. And what about this particular Mukuta Yoga? Do you see anything about it that you'd want to highlight?
Jupiter is going to be Vargotama in the D9 chart, so it has strength.
Jupiter is not merely in its own sign, it's Vargotama, and here it's also, the Mukuta Yoga manifests out of the 3rd house, right?
Yeah.
Jupiter from the birth lagna is the 3rd Lord in the 3rd house. From the moon, it again becomes the 3rd Lord. Right? But then, you know, you need to look at timing, and well, first I'll just show you Navamsha here. We have some Vargotama planets. Jupiter's Vargotama, Mercury's Vargotama. If this is the correct Navamsha Lagna, Mercury gets direction strength. Venus is this habilitation sign, but with cancellation. And this is relevant when we look at timing. Should this be the correct Dashamsha Lagna, which actually after examining timing, I think it might be. What strikes you about it? Anything?
Mercury-Venus exchange?
Well, Mercury is in the Lagna, involved in an exchange. Saturn, the Yoga Karaka, would be in the 1st, right? And since the moon in the birth chart, let's see, what's the moon? Yeah, no, I don't know if I wouldn't consider there to be a Shubha Sankhya Yoga flanked by, you know, the moon and Venus, unless you take the moon as a benefic here. Right? But still, and then here's what I wanted you to see in terms of timing. He first directed, his first film he directed in Saturn Rahu. Okay? Saturn Rahu, and you have to see that timing in Dashamsha. What strikes you about that timing in Dashamsha, Saturn Rahu?
110.
Obviously, Rahu's falling in the 10th from Saturn, regardless of whether it's Taurus or Ascendant. And what about Rahu's status here?
It's in the sign of Saturn, considered Svarashi.
It's in the sign of Saturn and considered its own sign, and then it gets the additional aspect of the benefic Jupiter, right? So his directorial, but then actually a lot of his success would come in Mercury. Would come in the Mercury Mahadasha, which in the birth chart would not be real apparent.
Well, it's a Viparita Raja Yoga, right? Sun and Mercury in the...
Why do you have to be so quick, Niyama? Okay, I'm trying to stump the panel here. Okay, I'm just teasing. She sees that Leo is the 8th house, and the sun goes to the 12th. Mercury is the 6th lord. It joins Leo, joins the sun there, which produces some Viparita Raja Yogas, but by what other principle of Jyotish could the Mercury Mahadasha give a considerable amount of success and status, particularly in a leadership role, by any other principle of Jyotish that you might be aware of?
Mark, what's the nakshatra of Mercury?
Well, the nakshatra of Mercury it's at 16 degrees 20 minutes. So which nakshatra would that put it in?
It'll be in Venus's nakshatra.
Purvasha.
Venus is nakshatra. And this, if you apply the idea of Uru's clue, which I always do, then yes, this would be a very relevant point based on everything we know and talked about with regards to Venus. But there's another very standard Jyotish principle here that I refer to frequently in my articles, and even wrote an article about, that would also suggest the kind of results that Mercury could give and did give.
Dasha Lagna?
Yes. Comment on that, please.
I mean, from Mercury, it's basically the 10th lord. It's in 9-10th combination from Mercury. It's the Dharmakar Madhipati Yoga from Dasha Lagna.
Right, and you all know how I feel about Kendra Sambandha. Who are these planets in Kendra Sambandha with?
Well, with Jupiter, which is the third lord.
With the very strong Jupiter. And then, of course, if this is the correct Navamsha Lagna, Mercury gets directional strength there. But I believe it would need to be, to give this kind of result, I believe it would need to be in the Lagna of the Dashamsha here, forming quite significant combinations, and of course he's getting directional strength. But then Ketu obviously also was a hugely successful period, and it's when he when he directed that film Mother India that won all the awards, including Best Director for him. And Ketu, let's see, it was Ketu, what was the sub period? It was Ketu Saturn. What strikes you about that? Whose results does Ketu give?
Saturn.
Saturn's. And then go back to all the Sasha Yoga and 1-5 combinations that Saturn's involved in. And then the sub-period was actually Saturn itself. So I actually, I make a long story short because we could look at a lot more. I actually end up feeling that this chart is correct. And I don't know about the Hamsha, but I do believe that the Dashamsha is correct.
One more point, Mark.
Right.
The fact that Mercury is very combust and still gave strong favorable results confirms one of the points you make in that article, Icarus factor, that even if a planet is combust, but otherwise it's in a very good position, it will give strong results despite the combustion.
If there's compensation and if there's really strong placements in relevant divisional charts, which is what there is here. Yeah. And by the way, I was looking at the timing of his marriage, which was in Mercury, and again, if Mercury's not in the Navamsha Lagna here, and I believe that it is, that timing would probably not. That timing would be hard to make a case for, just based on the Rashi. All right.
The fact that Mercury is in Venus nakshatra.
Yes, it's in Venus's nakshatra.
And Venus aspects the 7th house too. And yes, Venus is the Karaka for marriage.
Yes, you could apply Uru's clue in that case. Yes, you could. But what struck me immediately about this, based on the charts that I'd seen, the Hollywood directors, was the Sasha Yoga and the 1-5 combination that was manifest from both the birth log and from the moon. All right, moving on here. Raj Kapoor, and you know, he seems to, I had no familiarity with this person prior to. I'm sure the Indians here do. Apparently, you know, he's one of the greatest, you might say, Bollywood, Indian film industry superstars, both acting and directing. And you know, quite a record of achievement, and very, very award-winning. And his birth time is again sort of on the hour, but let's presume it's correct, in which case it bears some certain similarities to the chart we just looked at, does it not? What would be some of those, you know, similarities?
Saturn Venus conjunction, Saturn exalted, Venus is in the own house.
Well, it's Sasha Yoga from both the birth lagna and the moon.
Asha Yoga from both the birth lagna and the moon, yes.
And there's the Venus-Saturn combination with, again, both of them having good sources of strength here, right? And you see any other similarities in terms of the yoga?
Mukti Yoga.
Yoga, very strong Mukta Yoga.
There's Mukta Yoga here, this time involving the moon, who's the Lagna Lord, right? A reasonably bright moon, although, you know, starting to wane.
Right, yeah, right and Swarashi, both are strong, Jupiter and Moon.
Jupiter is strong, again, obviously, in its Mula Trikona sign here. And just I'll show you Navamsha, but then the Dashamsha that this chart creates, which again, you know, I have some reason to believe that it might be correct, because one of his major achievements, well, first of all, a lot of his, a good portion of his achievements took place in the Mercury Mahadasha again, just like in the previous chart. And of course, in what way could that have been, you know, predictable, even though these planets are in the 6th house? What interpretive principles could apply here that could give this kind of result in the Mercury major period?
Voodoo's clue.
Again, Udu's clue, because Mercury, again, but that's more of like a second tier sort of thing. What would be more of a first tier sort of thing? What sort of special status does, you know, Mercury, besides ruling the 3rd house, which house does it rule?
3rd and the 12th.
So as the 12th lord, what do we know about 12th lords?
Impressionable, neutral.
They're impressionables, and who is it getting impressed by here?
The 9th Lord.
Well, Jupiter, and then therefore giving the results of Jupiter. And what are the results of Jupiter that we just sort of talked about?
The Mukti Yoga, plus also with Mercury, you have to take into account the angle, the angular connection with Mars, the Yoga Karaka for this Lagna.
Both Mars and Mercury, right?
Yeah.
Mercury gets strength in D9 too.
And plus, there's I believe there's this principle as well, which is a very common principle, that anytime planet gets the aspect or is conjunct with the 5th or the 9th Lord, it has the capability to bestow good results.
Those can add, you know, yes, they can add favorableness to whatever any period can give. But again, apply Dasha Lagna. What kind of combination is Mercury and Jupiter from Dasha Lagna? You said
So
110.
110.
And look how strong the 11th becomes from that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And Nidima mentioned in her quick sort of way that, you know, Mercury here has definitely source of strength in Navamsha, being in its own sign, actually giving Bhadra Yoga here. And I believe, let me just check my data, I believe he married in Mercury's sun.
Saturn Mercury or Sun Mercury?
Mercury sun.
He was 21, yeah.
Mercury sun. What strikes you looking at the Vamsha about Mercury sun? That looks pretty good, doesn't it?
No brainer, yeah.
That looks pretty good. And then I mentioned that one of his greatest achievements, let me get the note here, was Oh, well, his directorial debut. He started acting in Mercury, but his directorial debut came in Mercury and Mars at the age of 24, if you can imagine. And presuming this is the correct Samsha Lagna, but even if it's not the Samsha Lagna, what strikes you about this? Mercury and Mars.
Closely connected.
1/7
They're in Sambandha. Well, first of
Yeah.
all, what you want to see that Mercury's strongly placed in Gemini, its own sign. The second thing you'd want to see is that they're in a mutual glance with each other. Presuming this is the correct Lagna, they form a 5-10, Raja Yoga. And in what way is Mercury getting potentially enhanced here? Well, it is getting enhanced. It's not potentially.
aspected by Jupiter, Lagna Lord.
Benefic Hemming.
There you go. See?
Exchange, Venus.
See the benefic hemming with both planets, with planets exchanging, getting a source of strength that way, and then the moon being in its exaltation sign. So, Mercury here gave him his great rise, and it's not difficult to see why here, based on the situation in the
Mark, moon must be quite dark, no? I think moon must be quite dark.
The moon is it's not. It's waning, but still.
Not so dark, yeah.
I would say it's a very benefic moon in its own sign, 5 houses away. It's definitely a benefic moon.
But yeah, definitely.
It is, but you have to see that it's also under the influence of Rahu Ketu axis and aspected by Saturn. So it's not, it's got some affliction as well. But it's got some positive.
Yeah, I mean, sure, those things did show up in his life because of addiction and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's still.
I agree. I'm not disputing. It's just there's another side to it as well. All right.
Just one more point, Mark. There's another yoga that Mercury is involved in, the Vasumati yoga.
Well, talk about that.
Benefics in, I believe, 3, 6, 11 from the moon or the Lagna.
Well, it's not a full Vasumati yoga because of Venus's placement, right?
Right, but I'm just saying that Jupiter and Mercury, are from the Lagna and the moon, 6 of 8.
They're two benefics in the 6th house.
Yeah.
No, point well taken.
Nodal Raja Yogas.
Well, talk about that.
I mean, when you have Kendra Lord or a Trikona Lord in Rahu Ketu axis with that Lord, here you can take moon as a Trikona Lord in a Kendra.
And then what additionally, these yogas in my experience are also formed by aspect. Rahu acting as a Kendra Lord also gets the aspect of who?
Saturn?
As a Trine Lord.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I take it back. Scratch that. But there is a combination here that reminds me of the chart. Actually, there's a lot of that. This reminds me of the chart of Jawaharlal Nehru, who also had Cancer Lagna with the moon there, with Jupiter in the 6th, right?
Yes.
But you've all read my article, or should have read my article, Intimate Connections, where I talked about a certain passages from Parashara Hora about certain planets and situations that they might be in that they can give a Raja Yoga effect that apply to this chart. Does anyone recall? Remember what the article Intimate Connections was about? What was it about?
Was it about Dasha Lagna?
Co-workers?
No.
Yes, go ahead. Talk about it.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Where is the co-working taking place here?
Oh, I remember now. So basically, it's when the 10th Lord and the 10th Lord and
Jupiter Mars co-working, 9th and 10th lots.
Well, Jupiter Mars, Mars doesn't really qualify here because I believe they form an angle triangle combination by Kendra Sambandha. But the mutual co-work is required that planets in Kendra from each other, not just in Kendra signs, but in Kendras from each other, have a good dignity. So who are the co-workers here?
Mercury, Jupiter with Mars?
No, they have to be in angles from each other.
Oh, Saturn, Moon, Venus, Moon.
Venus, Moon. Moon is in its own sign and Venus is in its own sign. And not only are they in angles from each other, but they're in angles from the birth lagna as well. So they would qualify as those mutual co-workers, which can give rise, in the chart of Jawaharlal Nehru, you see the exact same thing. He became the first prime minister of India in Moon Venus. Now, let me look at some more timing here. He you can see here, the government of India honored him with the Padma Bhushan Award, if I'm saying that correctly, in 1971. And then he got the India's highest award in cinema, however you pronounce that award. Which was
That's a Falke Award. It's one of the highest awards. Very few people get it.
So these were in 1971 and 1987, respectively. The one happened in Venus Rahu. Remember this idea of, sort of Venus Rahu. Venus can also give sort of defining moments in a person's life under the right conditions too. And the other was in Sun Mercury. So let's go back and look at these here. Venus Rahu, what strikes you about that? What's it activating? It's activating the mutual co-worker combination besides the Rahu yogas that the Venus is involved in here, right? Which is Malavya Yoga.
And also the nodal Raja Yoga.
It's also the nodal Raja Yoga. And when he runs Venus, think about this combination from Dasha Lagna. Right? Where it puts Venus and Saturn as that combination of 1-5 in the first house with Rahu and Moon falling in the 10th from there. So I don't have any trouble accepting this Lagna, by the way. And I think actually the divisional charts are accurate as well, Navamsha and Dashamsha. Now, the other timing was, what was it, Sun Mercury, did I say? Sun Mercury, and this is again why I believe that well, in terms of the Dashamsha, what strikes you about Sun Mercury? Or, yeah, Sun Mercury.
Both are strong.
Mercury is in his own house.
And the Sun?
Exalted.
Exalted. And they would be placed well if Sagittarius is indeed the Lagna. And of course, the Sun would also, well, if you take house lordships, which I do, you can see for yourself which houses these planets rule, where they're placed, and what their condition is. And most of you have taken my webinar, Secrets of the Dashamsha, and/or read my book. And this is sort of the classic timing in D10 of a period and subperiod that can give very, very strong and good results.
Just a side note, Mark. His father was considered to be the founding was considered to be the founder of the Indian film industry, and was a very powerful person, so to speak. And that's why he started so young in this career and everything. So just from the 9th house, this chart is pretty spectacular, and with the 9th lord being so powerful.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Now he, as a part of a way of verifying these charts, I was also looking at when people passed away and whether that, got clearly reflected by the activation of Marakas. And he passed away, he died in Sun Ketu. What strikes you about that?
Sun is the lord of the 2nd and Ketu is in the 7th house.
That's it. Both of them primary Marakas. So I was, when I first received these charts, I was rather skeptical about them, which is why I didn't spend a lot of time counting. But as I've investigated them more, and I have to thank Nilima, she did some research for me this way, and I feel that the charts are pretty accurate. So next is this. Now the next two I have a greater question about, quite frankly. So this is the man Manoj Kumar, another apparently giant sort of in the industry. He's also won these, you can see the last paragraph here, he's also won these very, very distinguished awards. And, you know, his birth time was given as 1845, kind of again, you know, not on the half hour of the hour, but on the quarter hour. And it gives this chart. But now here was then the confusing thing for me, and I didn't have time to resolve it when I was getting ready for this webinar. If you look on the Astro Sage website, gives this exact same data, meaning July 24th, 1937, giving this time of 1845 and this location in Pakistan. But if you go to that website, you will see that it gives Capricorn Lagna. Whereas if you run this data in your programs, as I did here in Sri Jyotish Star, it clearly gives Sagittarius Lagna, and not really one very close on the edge, 23 degrees.
But Mark, I think in the Ainamsha, there are times when you have more than 3 degrees difference.
Well, the Ainamsha would have to be different by 7 degrees or more. No Ainamsha.
Capricorn is just about 2 degrees away from, oh, sorry,
No,
this is Jupiter is 28. This is just 23 degrees. Oh,
right.
Oh.
So it can't be a Ainamsha issue. And again, I was preparing, as I always do for this, just before the webinar itself, because I want everything to be fresh in my mind. So I'd be interested to see if people have other programs, they run this same data, and what Lagna comes up for them. Now, regardless, the moon's in Capricorn, right? So Chandra Lagna is going to be Capricorn. But here was a man who became a very notable individual and had his greatest success in the Jupiter Mahadasha. Had his greatest success in the Jupiter Mahadasha, which obviously would tend to favor, I mean, what about this Jupiter here, besides being in its own sign?
Vargottama.
And Digbala retrograde.
And Digbala.
You know, so very, very, very strong Jupiter. And it is the major period that gave him his greatest success and made him a notable individual. So is it, you know, giving Hamsa Yoga in the first house, or is it a very strong 12th Lord in the 12th house? And then, you know, are there any, you know, rather significant Raja Yogas that occur from Sagittarius?
9-10.
9-10, albeit in the 8th house, right? And then I was looking at timing. You know, as I said, you know, his real peak came in Jupiter Venus. The real peak came in Jupiter Venus. Obviously, the period and subperiod are two planets that are very strong in the birth chart, but also 6-8 from each other. Venus would be the 11th Lord in the 6th. From the moon, obviously Venus is a good yoga karaka planet, including Lord of the 10th house. You see these planets in, you can see them in Navamsha, but then see them in Dashamsha. And that may more tell the story regardless of the birth chart. Why? Jupiter, Venus.
Conjunct in the 3rd house.
Well, they're together, number one, right? And participants in what significant yoga that is a very reliable one with regards to the divisional charts in my experience that I've talked about.
Kesari Yoga?
4-9.
Kesari, in your case, it's a true, you know, Kesari Yoga where Jupiter has the additional influence of the natural benefic. And then, you know, this major award that he got, this Padma Shri Award, by the government of India, India's highest award in cinema, came in Saturn Moon. Saturn Vargottama relative to this division.
Aspected by 2 benefics.
Aspected by 2 benefics. But where does it fall? You know, does it fall in the
9th house?
9th house, or does it fall in some other house? If you go back to the degree of the Lagna that this birth time of 1845 gives, 23-9, what do you notice about that? The
Oh, you
dividing,
back it just a little bit. 2320 would be the dividing line, right?
no, 24 would be the dividing.
Oh, 22. Sorry.
So if you advance, it would be the difference between the 8th Dashamsha and the 9th Dashamsha. In other words, the Dashamsha Lagna here could advance, in which case, actually, I like Cancer better because of what it does and where it puts the Saturn moon and the Venus Jupiter conjunction. But, again, these are finer distinctions that are not. The big question about this is that, why does Astro Sage with the same birthday give this a Capricorn Lagna, and why does my program give it a Sagittarius Lagna? I have to research that more. But
just my personal experience, Mark. I don't believe. I have had only very minimal success with the timing there. I know some people who've loaded timing for other celebrities on that platform. So just be careful of the timing.
When you say the birth date is not good, or their calculations?
Yeah. The birth data is not very accurate on AstroSage.
Got you. Well, and this is why I was skeptical about it, right? Now, Vijay Anand. Again, seems to be a very significant person in the Indian cinema. And with these charts, even if the birth lagna is suspect, of course, we can, see the Chandra lagna. We've seen in these charts how important seeing things from Chandra lagna is. What do you notice about this chart that's quite unique, different?
From Chandra Lagna, it becomes strong with all the grahas in the 10th house.
He got one of those situations. So he was born at one of those times that happens on occasion, where you've got no less than 6 grahas in one sign here, which actually makes such a chart in certain ways more difficult to interpret, because so many house lords are connected. And this is actually the way K and Rahu really liked Charadasha, because if you have an accurate Charadasha, every time you change Charadasha, the different house is going to get emphasized with all these grahas, and of course, houses that then it also aspects. But of course, what significant yogas would it be giving from the moon here? The one in particular, as it relates to what we've been talking about here.
110.
1-5. Okay.
Right, Sasha Yoga. Now, when you see planets grouped together like this, what you're always looking for is how, if any of them are combust, and how, if any of them form planetary wars. What would you see in this case?
I don't think there's a planetary war.
There's no planetary war or any planets suffering from combustion.
Mercury.
Mercury, 8 and 10. It's 2 degrees.
Mercury. The information I was able to get off Wikipedia is that he first directed in the Sun period. Was directed in the Sun period, and then peak periods for him was Moon Jupiter, Moon Venus, and of course, from Chandra Lagna. But one thing I was looking at just to try to verify this, and I didn't have a lot of time to verify it in a lot of different ways, but he did die in Jupiter, Mercury, Jupiter. And if it's Sagittarius, what strikes you about that?
Yeah. Well, 7th Lord, Jupiter, Mercury in the 8th.
Jupiter becomes the Maraka, right?
Yeah.
Primary mark is the 7th Lord, and then Mercury is the Lagna Lord.
Lagna Lord.
With affliction. Okay? So that one event, the timing of that or one event comes out in that way. Now, I mentioned that one of the 2 of the peak periods, and again, so don't focus so much on the Lagna here because I'm not sure how correct it is, but 2 peak periods were Moon Venus and Moon Jupiter. And you see the Moon here with Venus, and both of them aspected by Jupiter. I don't suspect that this is the correct Dashamsha Lagna. I think it might be Aquarius. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
Particularly since the Sun was the first major period that, you know, he had his directorial sense. It would put that in the 10th house. Getting directional strength there would be Jupiter in the Lagna, getting directional strength, and also Jupiter in Aquarius. And then those planets, Moon, Mars, and Venus, would fall in the 6th house. And think about the combinations they would form from Aquarius. So I suspect that would be the case. You wouldn't have to push the degree of the Lagna back very far to give that that Lagna, or advance it, I should say.
Mark, can I just make a point?
Of course.
This chart reminded me of Rajneesh,
Yeah.
Osho Rajneesh.
He believed in Rajneesh too.
And I just checked online. He was actually in the inner circle of Rajneesh with all those planets in the 8th. I mean,
that's very fascinating. I'm glad you mentioned that to me. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. That is quite an 8th house if Gemini is indeed the Lagna, right?
Yeah. Very brilliant man, though.
Very brilliant man, yes.
Genius.
So is Rajneesh.
Yes, exactly.
So again, this is a birth date from 2009. So it was the oldest of.
Mark, can I ask a quick question on the previous chart?
Of course, of course.
Would you consider Pravraja Yoga?
Well, you know, first of all, for those who may not be aware, what are you referring to?
Well, when you
define that yoga.
Pravraja Yoga is when you have 4 or more planets in one house, or Saturn aspecting Moon, or in D1 and D3, Moon is in the sign of Mars or Saturn.
You certainly recall some of the parameters for those yogas very correctly, Neela. What you may be forgetting is that for there to be a true Pravraj yoga based on the idea of 4 planets in a house, the 10th Lord must be involved.
10th Lord, but 10th Lord's aspecting it.
Yes, but I think the spirit of that is that it's part of the 4-planet conjunction.
Yes, it's true.
Now, what the classics say about Pravraj yoga is that, you know, it could make you renunciate or make you someone who admires and esteems these individuals, which, as a disciple of Rajneesh, that would certainly be the case.
Oh, yes, definitely.
I mean, and it seems like if he was in the inner circle, which means he probably had renounced, you know, his life, and must have been in the ashram for an extended period to be in that inner circle.
Very possibly.
Just because Rajneesh was in an ashram, can we call him a renunciate?
No, well, I'd say he took on the garb of that, you know. I mean, he was a very controversial figure, right? But,
Yes.
you know, he was a, you know, in terms of this sort of external sort of things, you know, he didn't have he wasn't married, didn't have a family, didn't own anything himself apparently, you know, all these sort of things. But he's a controversial figure. I understand what you're saying, Venkat. but I think Neely's point is well taken. There are Pravraj yoga type tendencies in this chart.
From the Moon Lagna, 10th Lord is in the 10th house. All these grahas are forming in the 10th house. So.
There's no question that from the Moon, there's Pravraj yoga. Right? There's no question of that.
Yeah, no, just a thought.
So you bring up an interesting idea. Now I want to bring up my...
Just one more thing, Mark, there. I just read that he married his niece.
Yeah, very young niece.
The Venus-Mercury combination in the 8th there, what do you call, in the D1 chart, and in the D9, I think they're again conjunct, and in the 6th house where Venus is the 7th Lord. I think that has something to do with that as well.
Well, now, sort of the niece is the daughter of one of your siblings, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was very controversial when he got married.
Right.
So
didn't take long.
Was it that of a younger sibling or older?
Very
sibling?
young. She was way younger than him.
No. Was the sibling whose daughter it was Was that a younger sibling or an older sibling? Any idea?
I thought it was the cousin, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, even I'm not sure, but I think it was some cousin's daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see. So that's okay. All right. So now I want to stop sharing screen in this document here, pull up my program, because Georgie sent me a chart. Georgie, you still with us?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to have to change databases here, and then I'm going to pull up a chart that you sent me. I'm getting there. Hold on. I must have misfiled this here. Sorry. Anyway, Georgie, while I'm getting the chart up, could you sort of explain what you wrote to me and you know, as a prelude to my displaying this chart, could you share with everyone?
Yes. And so in August 2017, one girl was introduced to me while I was in Bulgaria for the summer. And her background back then was she was starring in a reality TV series in Bulgaria. And she was on the way to become very famous on Instagram in Bulgaria. She used to be a journalist, a blogger, a catwalk and photo model. And she asked me several questions. And one of the questions she asked me back then was whether she could become a movie director. And obviously I was skeptical initially before looking at the chart. And then I look at the chart. And using some logical triangulations, because at that point of time, I didn't know the combinations for a movie director. I use some triangulation, some logical thinking. And
Georgie, can I interrupt you for a second? Can you give me the data again? I thought I'd entered it, but I can't find the chart. Can you give me the data again? I know it was Sofia, Bulgaria was the location, right?
Yes. Location is Sofia, Bulgaria. She was born on 4:55 p.m. In 1992, June. I think was June. Just wait a second.
Can you look it up?
Yes. June 5th.
June 5th, 1992?
Yeah, and at 4:55 p.m. Sofia, Bulgaria.
4:55, and that was in the afternoon, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I should be able to get the chart up here. This gives me a chart with Libra Lagna, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so now I have to share screen. I'm nearly getting there. Okay, it's going to come up. Everyone should be seeing a chart with Libra Lagna, correct?
Yep.
And current period is Venus Rahu. That's in that's in the Vimshotri system, and then in Chardasha, running Capricorn Aries. Capricorn Aries. So first of all, you know, he just shared with you sort of the different things that about this person's background. They are in the entertainment industry. They're actually in that industry as a performer. They're originally doing some modeling, and you know, aspire to direct. In which case, what strikes you?
Sasha Yoga.
Sasha Yoga from both the birth lagna and the moon, in which Saturn is from the birth log anyway, also Yoga Karaka planet, right?
Yeah.
And then, actually, I'm going to get more Dashamsha up here rather than Navamsha. And then currently running, well, what other notable features of this chart do you see?
Third Lord aspects the third house.
Third Lord Jupiter aspect its own third house, which helps that house flourish. Okay, what else?
Dhanu Yoga is 111 in the 8th house.
So the 11th Lord Sun and the first Lord Venus are together in the 8th. There's some question of combustion with Venus, right? And then there's the Mercury-Venus combination, which is what kind of combination also for Libra?
1-9.
1-9. Keep in mind she's running the Venus Mahadasha.
Mm.
But, what do you see? Well, now that's another rather notable feature here of the chart. Do people see the 10th Lord in the 10th house forming a 1-4, 1-5, 10-5, 10-5.
10-5.
Yeah, this is, and the significance of that being is that this is one of the kinds of Raja yogas that I highlighted or was very evident continuously in the charts of movie directors. Now, she's running Venus, has been running Venus, will continue to run Venus until age 38 in 2030. So she has a 10 more years, half of the dasha. And, see this combination from Chandra Lagna, strong Chandra Lagna, but then also see this combination from Dasha Lagna.
From Chandra Lagna, there is Saraswati Yoga.
Yes, and she's running the Venus period. Good. Remember how often we saw Saraswati Yoga in the charts of the directors? Not always from the birth Lagna, but frequently also from Chandra Lagna. And sometimes people say, well, how legitimate is that? And I just point out there's a passage in Parashara Hora that just very clearly states that after seeing the patterning from the birth Lagna and the yogas, these have to be considered also from the moon. I mean, it's not, and especially I think that it is always is the case, but especially when there's a very strong Chandra Lagna, sometimes you'll see that reflects more the patterning in the lifetime than in certain ways than even that of the birth chart. So we have this Saraswati Yoga from the moon. She's running the Venus period.
And from Dasha Lagna, we have this Maharaja Yoga.
We have Venus and Mercury becomes a very nice combination, does it not? In Dasha Lagna. Very nice combination. With
even
Saturn.
Even Venus Sun is a good combination.
It is. And then also from Dasha Lagna, Saturn becomes a Yoga Karaka. So Georgie, correct me if I'm wrong, Georgie, you identified the Venus-Saturn period as being one where she might be able to realize this ambition, yes? Georgie?
Yes, I did.
You did, yeah. Which is, not that far down the road. She's going to enter Venus-Saturn age 31 in 2023. And is there any support for that idea in, say, the Dashamsha? Venus-Saturn.
Yeah, both planets are well placed.
Both planets are well placed. And what is Saturn's condition here?
Saturn has Digbala.
Saturn has directional strength. Right. So I just thought it was curious. Apparently my story about the individual that had contacted me from India asking about whether they could be a movie director obviously sparked George's memory of having been asked the same question by this person. And, prior to that, he'd not seen this article, but now having seen this article, he saw that her chart actually contained some of the things that could actually give this. Now, there's additional things here that were in the article that also apply to this chart. Does anyone see what they are that we haven't mentioned yet?
Strong Sun and Mars in the 10th house. In D10.
In D10, yes, but what I was looking for is in the Rashi. Is there any connection of the Sun and Mars to the Lagna or the Lagna Lord?
Mars, definitely. And
Aspects
Sun
Lagna.
also, yeah, both.
Mars is Vargotama.
Mars having considerable strength, right?
Yeah.
Vargotama aspecting the Lagna, and the Sun
With the Lagna Lord.
is with the Lagna Lord. So I will be very curious as to whether this woman actually realizes her ambition is coming director, and Georgie, you'll share that with me, right? In which case I would share it with everyone else. We have a few years to find out, right? But,
There is also support. There's also support in the Charadasha, Mark.
okay, you see, what did you see?
Aquarius, she starts her Aquarius period from where benefics are in the Kendra. AMK, the fourth, the AMK goes to the fourth house there. Plus there is Argala, nice Argala from the fourth house. So yeah, there's support.
Confirmation. In which case, Georgie, who, by the way, has very good predictive ability that I've been able to be a witness to, will have given another successful prediction without even knowing the predictive parameters.
Yes.
And, you know, as John F. Kennedy said, I'd rather be lucky than good. Let's say our Sanskrit prayers. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Sarvesham Swasti Bhavatu Sarvesham Shanti Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Satta. Enjoyed being with you all.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and until we all meet again, namaste.